The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as Ambassador Zelith of the Varian Empire stepped forward to the central podium. Her crystalline skin reflected the ambient light, casting rainbow patterns across the curved walls of the massive space station that served as the heart of interstellar diplomacy. Around her, representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and electronic translations. "Esteemed colleagues," Zelith began, her voice carrying through the translation network to reach every being present. "We face an unprecedented crisis. The Horde advances through our outer territories like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Our combined fleets have proven insufficient. Our most advanced weapons merely delay the inevitable." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Horde had appeared 18 months ago from the dark regions beyond the galactic rim, their ships unlike anything the established civilizations had encountered. They showed no interest in communication, negotiation, or even plunder. They simply arrived, overwhelmed any resistance, and left behind dead worlds stripped of all organic matter. Representative Korvash of the hegemony, his insectoid features clicking with agitation, rose from his seat. "What do you propose, Ambassador? We have already committed our finest military minds and most powerful fleets to this war." Zelith's expression grew solemn. "There is one option we have not yet considered, one species that has remained outside our alliance, despite our repeated invitations." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "The humans of Earth." A collective intake of breath swept through the chamber. Several representatives began speaking at once, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of concern and protest. "The humans are primitives," declared Ambassador Urix of the Stellar Confederation, his blue skin shifting darker with emotion. "They have barely achieved faster than light travel. What could they possibly offer against a threat that has defeated our most advanced civilizations?" Zelith activated a holographic display showing recent battlefield recordings. The images were horrific. Horde vessels swarming through space like metallic locusts, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with an oily sheen. Entire fleets disappeared beneath waves of enemy ships, their distress signals cut short with terrifying efficiency. "Our military doctrine focuses on honor, strategic positioning, and technological superiority," she explained, her voice steady despite the grim imagery. "We engage in warfare as a calculated endeavor, following established protocols and rules of engagement. The Horde operates by different principles entirely. They are relentless, savage, and utterly without mercy." The hologram shifted to display Earth's solar system, a small blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "Human history is different from ours. While we were building our peaceful confederations and establishing diplomatic protocols, they were locked in continuous warfare. For thousands of years, they fought each other with increasing brutality and innovation. Their entire evolutionary path has been shaped by conflict." Commander Thex of the military coalition, his cybernetic implants gleaming, leaned forward in his seat. "You speak of their primitive nature as an advantage?" "I speak of their experience," Zelith replied. "When we encountered humanity 40 years ago, they were in the midst of what they called a world war. A global conflict involving weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had developed strategies and tactics born from desperate necessity, not academic theory." She manipulated the display to show archived footage from first contact with Earth. Human soldiers moved with a grim efficiency that seemed alien to most species in the chamber. Their equipment was crude by galactic standards, but they wielded it with a precision that spoke of hard-won experience. "We offered them membership in our confederation," Zelith continued. "We offered to share our technology, our knowledge, our peaceful way of existence. They politely declined. Their leaders told us they needed to sort things out at home first." "And what makes you think they would help us now?" asked Representative Korvash, his mandibles clicking skeptically. Zelith turned to face the assembly directly. "Because despite their refusal to join us politically, they have been monitoring our situation. 3 days ago, I received a transmission from Earth. They know about the Horde. They know about our losses." She paused, her crystalline features reflecting her uncertainty. "They have offered to help." The chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives argued that involving such a primitive species would be counterproductive. Others worried about the implications of bringing humans into their conflicts. The humans' reputation for violence was well documented, and many species had found their aggressive tendencies disturbing during initial diplomatic contacts. Admiral Vorthak of the Defense Fleet, a massive being whose species had evolved from aquatic predators, stood slowly. His presence commanded immediate attention, and the chamber fell silent. "What exactly did they offer, Ambassador?" Zelith hesitated for a moment. "They said they would send troops, not ships, not technology, just personnel. They requested detailed information about Horde tactics and capabilities, along with transportation to the front lines." "How many troops?" Admiral Vorthak inquired. "They didn't specify numbers. They said they would send what was needed." The Admiral's expression grew thoughtful. In his long military career, he had studied human combat footage with professional interest. Their methods were indeed brutal by galactic standards, but there was an undeniable effectiveness to their approach. While other species had developed warfare as a tool of policy, humans seem to have made it an art form. "There is precedent for this," he said finally. "During the Sector 7 conflicts, we employed mercenaries from less advanced species. If the humans are willing to serve in a support capacity, they were very clear about their terms," Zalith interrupted. "They don't want to serve under our command structure. They want complete tactical autonomy in whatever operations they undertake. They'll coordinate with our forces, but they won't subordinate themselves to our military hierarchy." This revelation sparked another wave of heated discussion. The idea of giving primitive aliens independent command authority was unprecedented and deeply troubling to many representatives. Representative Yurik stood again, his voice sharp with indignation. "This is absurd. We cannot grant such authority to a species that has never fought beyond their own star system. They lack experience with space warfare, with alien psychology, with losing," Admiral Vorthak interrupted quietly. The chamber fell silent again. "That is what they lack experience with. Every species in this chamber has suffered defeat at the hands of the Horde. Our finest tacticians have been outmaneuvered. Our most advanced fleets destroyed. Perhaps what we need is not more experience with space warfare, but more experience with winning." Ambassador Zelith nodded slowly. "The humans study war differently than we do. Where we see tactics and strategy, they see survival and adaptation. Where we calculate odds and risk assessments, they calculate what it takes to kill an enemy before that enemy kills them." She activated another holographic display, this one showing psychological profiles compiled during humanity's initial contact period. The data painted a picture of a species shaped by millennia of brutal conflict, where survival often depended on rapid adaptation and overwhelming violence. "Their planet has no apex predator," she explained, "because they became the apex predator. They didn't just survive by being clever or fast or strong, they survived by being more ruthlessly effective killers than anything else on their world." The implications hung heavy in the air. Most species in the chamber had evolved from prey animals, or from worlds where cooperation was the key to survival. The concept of a species that had literally fought its way to the top of its food chain through pure aggressive dominance was both fascinating and terrifying. "What assurances do we have that they won't turn on us once the threat is eliminated?" asked Representative Korvash, voicing the fear that many in the chamber shared. Zelith considered the question carefully. "None, in the traditional sense. But their history suggests that while humans are capable of incredible violence, they are also capable of remarkable restraint. They have internal mechanisms for controlling their aggressive tendencies, codes of conduct they call ethics, and honor that govern when and how they apply force. And if those mechanisms fail, then we will face the same choice we face now with the Horde: fight or die. But at least we will face that choice from a position of strength rather than from the edge of extinction." The debate continued for hours, but gradually, the weight of their desperate situation began to tip the scales. The Horde was advancing through 3 separate corridors, and their projected timeline showed complete galactic conquest within 2 years. Traditional military responses had proven inadequate. Finally, Admiral Vorthak called for a formal vote. "All in favor of accepting human military assistance under the proposed terms?" The count was close, but the measure passed. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many carried expressions of deep uncertainty. They were about to invite the galaxy's most violent species to help them fight a war. Ambassador Zaleth remained behind, staring at the holographic display of Earth. The decision was made, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they might have just traded one existential threat for another. The humans had agreed to help, but what would arrive might be something far more dangerous than the soldiers they had requested. 3 days later, the first human ship appeared at the edge of the Proxima Defense Fleet's perimeter. It was a modest vessel by galactic standards, no larger than a patrol cruiser, and equipped with technology that seemed primitive compared to the Confederation's finest warships. But there was something about its design that made even veteran spacers uneasy. Every line of the hull suggested purpose, efficiency, and a complete disregard for anything except the business of making war. The ship's commander identified himself simply as Colonel Morrison and requested immediate transport to the front lines. He was accompanied by what he described as a reconnaissance unit, 12 humans in equipment that looked cobbled together from various sources but maintained with obvious care. Admiral Vorthak met them personally at the docking bay. The humans were smaller than he had expected, their equipment basic, compared to Confederation standards, but their eyes held something he recognized from his own species' predatory ancestors, a calm, patient evaluation of everything around them as potential threat or potential advantage. "Colonel," the Admiral said through his translator, "welcome to the Proxima Station. We appreciate your species' willingness to assist in our time of need." Morrison nodded curtly. "Understood, sir. We'll need detailed briefings on enemy capabilities, current tactical situations, and available resources. How soon can we be deployed to an active engagement zone?" The directness of the request caught the Admiral off guard. Most military consultants wanted to observe and analyze before committing to action. "We had planned for you to observe several engagements." "Before, sir," Morrison interrupted politely but firmly. "We didn't come here to observe. We came here to fight. The sooner we engage the enemy, the sooner we can determine what works and what doesn't." Admiral Vorthak studied the human commander's face, seeing something that reminded him of his own species' most effective warriors, a complete absence of doubt or hesitation. These humans hadn't come to learn how to fight the Horde. They had come already knowing how they intended to fight the Horde. "Very well," he said finally. "I'll arrange for immediate transport to Sector 12. The Horde has been conducting probing attacks there for the past week." Morrison smiled, and for the first time, Admiral Vorthak understood why so many species found humans unsettling. It wasn't because they were violent. Most species could be violent when necessary. It was because they seemed to enjoy the prospect of violence in a way that other species found fundamentally alien. "Thank you, sir," Morrison said. "We'll take good care of your Horde problem." As the humans departed for the front lines, Admiral Vorthak found himself wondering if the Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake. They had asked for soldiers, but what they were getting felt like something else entirely, something that might prove more dangerous than the enemy they were meant to fight. The transport ship Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sector 12, immediately deploying sensor arrays to assess the tactical situation. Captain Nexus, a veteran officer from the Altarian Navy, had commanded escort missions for over 30 years, but he had never carried passengers quite like these humans. Colonel Morrison and his 12-person unit had spent the 3-day journey in what they called mission prep. This involved activities that made the ship's crew profoundly uncomfortable. They had converted an empty cargo bay into what they termed a kill house, using improvised materials to create mock combat scenarios. The sounds that emerged from these training sessions, sharp impacts, controlled explosions, and brief commands delivered in emotionless tones, suggested a level of violence that seemed excessive for practice exercises. "Colonel," Captain Nexus announced through the intercom, "we're approaching the combat zone. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple Horde formations moving through the asteroid field." Morrison appeared on the bridge within minutes, his equipment already secured and his team assembled behind him. Each human carried personal weapons that looked crude compared to Confederation energy weapons, but Captain Nexus noticed they handled them with the unconscious competence of someone who had never known life without such tools. "What's the current situation?" Morrison asked, studying the tactical display with an intensity that made the bridge crew nervous. "Three Horde scout formations are conducting harassment attacks against our mining operations on Kepler 442b, Captain Nexus explained. "Our defense fleet has been trying to establish a protective perimeter, but the enemy ships are too fast and maneuverable for effective engagement." Morrison studied the display for several minutes, asking technical questions about Horde ship capabilities, weapons ranges, and movement patterns. His questions revealed a depth of tactical thinking that surprised the Altarian captain. These weren't the inquiries of a primitive species learning about space warfare, but the precise queries of a professional evaluating an enemy's weaknesses. "How many personnel are currently stationed on the planet?" Morrison asked. "Approximately 3,000 miners and technical support staff, plus a garrison of 500 Confederation Marines. Evacuation capabilities?" Captain Nexus hesitated. "Limited. The transport vessels were damaged in the initial attack. Full evacuation would require at least 8 hours. Assuming no further enemy interference." Morrison nodded slowly, then turned to his team. Without speaking, he made a series of hand gestures that his soldiers responded to with immediate understanding. The efficiency of their silent communication was remarkable, 12 individuals moving with the coordination of a single organism. "Captain," Morrison said, "we'll need immediate transport to the planet's surface. Can your ship provide fire support if necessary?" "Of course, but I should point out that Confederation military protocol requires coordination with the local defense commander before—" "We'll handle coordination," Morrison interrupted. "Just get us down there." The descent to Kepler 442b was accomplished under heavy Horde harassment fire. Captain Nexus watched in fascination as the human soldiers prepared for deployment. They checked their equipment with ritualistic precision, each movement practiced and economical. But what struck him most was their demeanor, no apparent anxiety, no last-minute preparations, just a calm readiness that suggested they had done this many times before. The humans deployed at Landing Zone Alpha, where Commander Vex of the Confederation Marines was coordinating the defense effort. The hegemony officer had been fighting the Horde for 6 months and had developed a healthy respect for their capabilities, but he was skeptical about the contribution that 12 primitives could make to a battle that had already claimed 200 of his best troops. "Colonel Morrison," Commander Vex said as the humans disembarked, "I appreciate the Council's gesture in sending assistance, but this is a complex tactical situation that requires—" "Creeding," Morrison cut him off with a raised hand, listening intently to something in his communications equipment. After a moment, he turned to his team and spoke a single word: "Hunt." The effect on the human soldiers was immediate and unsettling. Their relaxed alertness transformed into something predatory. They spread out in a formation that seemed random to Commander Vex but was clearly purposeful, each soldier taking a position that provided overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. "Sir," Morrison said to the commander, "we need real-time intelligence on enemy movement patterns and any available mapping data for the surrounding terrain." "I can provide that," Commander Vex replied, "but our current defensive strategy focuses on maintaining secure perimeters around critical installations. If you're planning some kind of reconnaissance mission—" "We're not reconnoitering," Morrison said simply. "We're going hunting." Before Commander Vex could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. Horde ground forces had been detected moving through the canyon system to the north, approximately 60 biomechanical warriors, supported by hover platforms, and what appeared to be some kind of artillery. "This is exactly what we've been dealing with," Commander Vex explained urgently. "They probe our defenses, force us to respond, then disappear before we can bring superior firepower to bear. Our casualties have been mounting because we can never pin them down for a decisive engagement." Morrison was studying a holographic terrain map, his fingers tracing possible approach routes and defensive positions. "How do they typically withdraw when pressed?" "Same way they attack through the canyon system. The terrain provides too much cover for our aerial assets to be effective." Morrison smiled, that same unsettling expression Admiral Vorthak had noticed. "Perfect." What happened next became the subject of intense military study for years afterward. Morrison divided his team into 3 4-person units and deployed them to positions that seemed to violate every principle of defensive warfare. Instead of establishing strong points or supporting existing defensive lines, they moved directly into the canyon system where the Horde forces were expected to operate. Commander Vex monitored their progress through drone surveillance, growing increasingly alarmed as he watched the humans advance deeper into terrain that his own forces had learned to avoid. The humans moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible given the heavy equipment they carried, using the landscape not as an obstacle to be overcome but as a tool to be exploited. The first contact came 40 minutes after deployment. A Horde patrol of 8 biomechanical warriors encountered Human Unit Alpha in a narrow ravine where Confederation forces had previously suffered heavy casualties. Commander Vex expected to watch the humans be overwhelmed within minutes. Instead, he witnessed something that challenged his understanding of warfare itself. The humans didn't fight the way Confederation forces fought, standing their ground, trading fire, attempting to achieve tactical superiority through superior technology and coordinated maneuvers. They fought like apex predators who had never learned that there was any option other than killing or being killed. The engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, 8 Horde warriors had been completely destroyed, and the humans were already moving to their next position. Their tactics were ruthlessly simple. Use the terrain to isolate individual enemies, attack from unexpected angles, and employ overwhelming violence to eliminate threats before they could respond effectively. "How are they moving so fast?" Commander Vex asked his tactical officer, watching the humans reposition with impossible speed. "Our forces require at least 15 minutes to move between those positions." "Unknown, sir. They appear to be using climbing techniques and movement methods not covered in standard military training." The pattern repeated throughout the day. Horde forces would attempt their usual harassment tactics, only to find themselves facing an enemy that refused to play by the established rules of engagement. The humans didn't defend positions, they hunted. They didn't establish perimeters, they set ambushes. They didn't wait for the enemy to attack, they stalked them through terrain that should have been impassable. By evening, the Horde had lost 37 warriors and 4 support platforms without inflicting a single casualty on the human forces. More importantly, their usual tactic of probing and withdrawing had been completely disrupted. Every time they attempted to disengage, they found their withdrawal routes compromised by human units that seemed to anticipate their movements with uncanny accuracy. The final engagement occurred just after sunset, when the remaining Horde forces attempted a coordinated assault on the main mining complex. It should have been their strongest tactical position, multiple approach routes, concentrated firepower, and the element of surprise. Instead, it became a massacre. The humans had spent the day learning Horde tactics, movement patterns, and behavioral preferences. When the final assault began, they were waiting, not in defensive positions, but in carefully prepared killing zones that turned the Horde's own aggression against them. Commander Vex watched through his command center's tactical displays as the humans executed what could only be described as a perfect ambush. The Horde forces found themselves caught in overlapping fields of fire from positions that seemed impossible to reach, attacked by an enemy that appeared and disappeared like ghosts, using weapons that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective. The entire engagement lasted 22 minutes. When it was over, every Horde unit in the sector had been eliminated, and the humans were already beginning to police the battlefield with methodical efficiency. "Colonel Morrison," Commander Vex said when the human commander returned to the base, "I've never seen anything like that. How did you know where they would be?" Morrison was cleaning his weapon with the same ritualistic precision he had shown during equipment checks. "We've been hunting things that wanted to kill us for a very long time, Commander. The trick isn't being stronger or faster or better armed. The trick is being smarter and more ruthless than whatever's trying to kill you. But their tactics, their technology, this was their strongest formation in the sector." Morrison looked up from his weapon maintenance, and Commander Vex saw something in the human's eyes that made him profoundly glad these beings were on his side. "Sir, with respect, you've been fighting them like soldiers fight soldiers. We fought them like humans fight monsters." News of the Sector 12 engagement reached Admiral Vorthak within hours. The complete elimination of a major Horde formation by 12 human soldiers was unprecedented. But the tactical reports raised as many questions as they answered. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that seemed to transcend their primitive technology and limited numbers. "Send another ship," Admiral Vorthak ordered his aide. "I want a full tactical analysis of their methods." "Sir," his aide replied hesitantly, "Colonel Morrison has requested additional resources for expanded operations. He's asking for authorization to take his team to Sector 7, where Horde forces have been conducting their heaviest attacks." Admiral Vorthak studied the battle reports one more time. The humans had accomplished in one day what Confederation forces had been unable to achieve in 6 months of fighting. But there was something about their methods that troubled him deeply. "What kind of additional resources?" he asked. "Tactical intelligence, transportation assets, and—" The aide paused. "Access to Confederation prisoners." Unquote. Prisoners? Apparently the humans captured several Horde warriors alive during the engagement. Colonel Morrison wants to study them. Juan. Admiral Vorthak felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. The Confederation's ethical guidelines strictly prohibited the interrogation or experimentation on sapient prisoners, even enemy prisoners. The humans' request suggested they had no such restrictions. "Send them to Sector 7, he said finally. "But assign a full monitoring team to observe their operations. I want to know exactly what we've unleashed on the galaxy." As the orders went out, Admiral Vorthak couldn't shake the feeling that the Galactic Council had made a decision that would have consequences far beyond their current crisis. The humans weren't just fighting the Horde, they were studying them, learning from them, adapting to them with a speed and flexibility that seemed almost supernatural. The Confederation had asked for soldiers. What they had received were hunters. And hunters, by definition, were always looking for new prey. 6 weeks after the Sector 12 incident, Admiral Vorthak found himself staring at reports that defied every principle of military science he had learned in 4 decades of service. The human forces, now expanded to 3 full companies deployed across 7 different sectors, had achieved what the Confederation's finest strategists had deemed impossible. They were winning. Not just winning individual engagements, they were systematically dismantling Horde operations with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Each human unit operated with complete tactical independence. Yet their actions coordinated seamlessly across vast distances. They shared intelligence through channels that Confederation analysts couldn't intercept or decode. And they adapted to new enemy tactics with a speed that suggested they were thinking several steps ahead of every engagement. "Sir," Commander Yex reported during the morning briefing, "we've received another request from Colonel Morrison. He wants permission to take a full battalion to the Outer Rim, where Horde forces have established what appears to be a major staging area." Admiral Vorthak studied the tactical display showing the current disposition of forces. Red markers indicated known Horde positions, which had decreased by 60% since human involvement began. Blue markers showed Confederation forces, which had been steadily withdrawn from active combat as human units proved more effective at independent operations. "What intelligence do we have on this staging area?" he asked. "Minimal. It's located in the void reaches, approximately 15 light-years beyond our current sensor network. All we know comes from long-range probe data, suggesting significant industrial activity and a heavy concentration of Horde vessels." Admiral Vorthak considered the request carefully. The humans had yet to fail in any mission they undertook, but they were also requesting increasingly dangerous assignments with larger force commitments. Each success seemed to fuel their appetite for more challenging operations. "How many personnel is Morrison requesting for this mission?" 400 soldiers, plus support equipment and transport assets for extended independent operations. The numbers were staggering. 400 humans would represent the largest deployment of Earth forces since their involvement began. But it was still tiny compared to the Confederation battle groups that typically undertook such operations. "Commander," Admiral Vorthak said slowly, "I want your honest assessment. Are we still in control of this alliance?" Commander Yex hesitated before responding. "Sir, the humans have exceeded every performance metric and operational objective we've established. Their casualties remain negligible. Their mission success rate is perfect. And they've eliminated more Horde forces in 6 weeks than we managed in the previous 6 months." "That's not what I asked." "No, sir. To answer your question directly, we're not controlling them. They're coordinating with us, sharing tactical intelligence when it serves their purposes, and generally operating within the broad parameters we've established. But they're conducting this war according to their own strategic vision. Admiral Vorthak activated a secure hologram showing recent battlefield recordings. The images were disturbing, even to a veteran military officer. Human forces didn't just defeat enemy units, they eliminated them with a thoroughness that suggested they viewed warfare not as politics by other means, but as pest control. "Look at this footage from the Centauri engagement," he said, highlighting specific sequences. The Horde forces attempted to surrender when their position became untenable. Standard Confederation protocol requires us to accept surrender and process prisoners according to established guidelines. The humans killed them all. "They killed them all," Admiral Vorthak confirmed. When I questioned Colonel Morrison about this, he said that Horde forces had forfeited any right to quarter when they engaged in what he called extinction warfare against civilian populations. Commander Yex studied the footage with professional interest. "The tactical results are undeniable, sir. Horde forces in that sector have become increasingly reluctant to engage human units. Intelligence suggests they've begun avoiding areas where humans are known to operate, which brings us to our real problem," Admiral Vorthak said, activating another set of displays. "The humans aren't just fighting the Horde. They're studying them. Every engagement provides them with more data about enemy capabilities, psychology, and strategic objectives. They're learning at a rate that suggests they view this entire conflict as an educational opportunity." The implications were staggering. While Confederation forces had been focused on defending their territory and minimizing casualties, the humans had been systematically deconstructing the Horde as a military force while simultaneously gaining comprehensive intelligence about their technology, tactics, and origins. "Sir," Commander Yex said carefully, "are you suggesting that the humans represent a potential threat to Confederation security?" Admiral Vorthak considered the question for a long moment. "I'm suggesting that we may have introduced a variable into this conflict that we don't fully understand. The humans didn't come here to help us defend ourselves, they came here to learn how to fight a galactic-level war." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the monitoring station in Sector 7. Captain Nexus appeared on the hologram, his usually composed demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. "Admiral," he reported, "we have a situation developing here that requires immediate attention. The human forces under Colonel Morrison have deviated from their assigned mission parameters." "Explain." "They were supposed to conduct reconnaissance on Horde supply lines moving through the Sigma corridor. Instead, they've launched what appears to be a full-scale assault on the primary Horde logistics hub. Current estimates suggest they're engaging enemy forces at a ratio of approximately 100 to 1. Admiral Vorthak felt a familiar chill. "Casualties? Unknown, sir. The humans have imposed a complete communication blackout. We're only receiving updates through their own tactical network. And those transmissions are encrypted beyond our ability to decode." The tactical display updated in real time, showing the progression of the engagement. Human forces had somehow penetrated deep into heavily defended Horde territory and were systematically destroying infrastructure that Confederation intelligence had deemed impossible to attack. More disturbing was the speed of their advance. They were moving through enemy positions at a rate that suggested minimal resistance. "How is this possible?" Commander Yex asked, studying the tactical data. "That facility is defended by at least 3 full Horde battle groups." "Unknown," Captain Nexus replied. "But Admiral, there's something else. Long-range sensors are detecting massive explosions throughout the facility. These aren't typical weapons signatures. The energy patterns suggest they're using some kind of industrial sabotage technique." Admiral Vorthak realized with growing alarm that the humans had fundamentally misunderstood their role in this conflict. Or perhaps they had understood it perfectly and chosen to pursue their own objectives instead. Either way, they were no longer operating as auxiliary forces supporting Confederation military goals. "Captain," he ordered, "I want immediate transport to Sector 7. I'm taking personal command of this operation." The journey to the battle zone took 18 hours, during which Admiral Vorthak received increasingly bewildering reports about the human assault. They had not only penetrated the Horde facility but had apparently captured key personnel and were conducting what they termed tactical interrogations. The implications of humans interrogating alien prisoners were, profoundly disturbing to species that had developed warfare within ethical frameworks. When Admiral Vorthak arrived at the forward observation post, the battle was essentially over. The Horde Logistics Hub, a massive industrial complex that had been operational for over a year, had been completely destroyed. More importantly, the humans had somehow extracted detailed intelligence about Horde strategic operations throughout the galaxy. Colonel Morrison met him at the landing pad, and Admiral Vorthak was struck by the change in the human commander's appearance. 6 weeks of continuous combat had transformed Morrison from a professional soldier into something harder and more predatory. His equipment showed the wear of constant use, but his bearings suggested someone who had found their natural element. "Admiral," Morrison said, "we've completed the operation successfully. Enemy logistics capabilities in this sector have been eliminated, and we've acquired significant intelligence about their overall strategic framework." "Colonel," Admiral Vorthak replied carefully, "your mission was reconnaissance, not assault. You exceeded your authority by conducting independent offensive operations." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Sir, respectfully, our mission is to eliminate the Horde threat to galactic civilization. Reconnaissance would have provided limited tactical value while allowing the enemy to continue using this facility to support operations against Confederation territories. And the prisoners? Confederation ethical guidelines clearly prohibit. The prisoners provided valuable intelligence about Horde command structures and strategic objectives," Morrison interrupted. "That intelligence has already been integrated into our operational planning for future missions." Admiral Vorthak studied the human commander's face, seeing something that confirmed his worst fears. The humans weren't just fighting this war, they were reshaping it according to their own understanding of what victory required. They had taken the Confederation's desperate plea for military assistance and transformed it into an opportunity to wage warfare on a galactic scale. "Colonel, I'm ordering an immediate stand-down of all human operations pending a full strategic review. Your forces will return to designated support roles under direct Confederation command." Morrison was quiet for several seconds, and Admiral Vorthak realized that the human was carefully considering how to respond to an order he clearly had no intention of following. "Sir," Morrison said finally, "I'm afraid that's not possible. We've identified the source of the Horde incursions, a massive staging area in the Void Reaches, where they're building forces for a final assault on Confederation core territories. Our intelligence indicates they're planning to launch this assault within 60 days. Then we'll coordinate with Confederation Fleet Command to develop an appropriate response." "Admiral," Morrison said, and his tone carried a finality that sent warning signals through every survival instinct Admiral Vorthak possessed. "Confederation Fleet Command has proven incapable of effective action against this enemy. Every engagement they've conducted has resulted in strategic failure and massive casualties. We can't allow that kind of incompetence to compromise the mission." The statement hung in the air between them like a declaration of independence. Admiral Vorthak realized that somewhere in the past 6 weeks, the humans had made a fundamental decision about their role in this conflict. They were no longer serving as auxiliary forces supporting Confederation military objectives. They had become an independent faction pursuing their own strategic goals. "What exactly are you proposing, Colonel?" Morrison activated a portable holographic display showing the Void Reaches and the estimated disposition of Horde forces. "We're going to eliminate their staging area and destroy their capacity for further offensive operations. This will require the full deployment of available human forces, approximately 2,000 personnel plus support assets." Admiral Vorthak stared at the tactical projection, seeing immediately that the humans were planning something far beyond the scope of any previously discussed operation. They weren't talking about raids or harassment, they were planning to wage a campaign of complete annihilation against the Horde's strategic capabilities. "The Confederation Council will never approve such an operation." Morrison smiled, and Admiral Vorthak finally understood why so many species had found humans disturbing during first contact. It wasn't their capacity for violence that was alien, it was their apparent enjoyment of the prospect of that violence. "Admiral," Morrison said, "we're not asking for approval. We're informing you of our intentions as a courtesy to our alliance partners. The Horde threat will be eliminated. The only question is whether the Confederation wants to coordinate with that effort or simply benefit from its results." As Admiral Vorthak watched Morrison's forces prepare for departure, He realized that the Galactic Council had fundamentally miscalculated when they invited human participation in this conflict. They had asked for soldiers to help them fight a defensive war. What they had received were executioners who were transforming that defensive war into a campaign of extermination. The humans were no longer fighting to save the Confederation from the Horde. They were fighting to eliminate the Horde from the galaxy, and based on their performance over the past 6 weeks, they were likely to succeed. The question that kept Admiral Vorthak awake during the return journey was simple. What would the humans do after they finished with the Horde? He suspected the galaxy was about to find out whether humanity's capacity for controlled violence was as reliable as their capacity for violence itself, and given what he had observed over the past 6 weeks, he wasn't optimistic about the answer.